All right. So we are on page 15b3. 15b3. And where we are in terms of the way that the Gemara is following along the story in the Megillah. So Esther, the queen, has, really overcome her fear. And we've talked about all of the psychological complexities of what was going on. And she ends up appearing before Achashverosh, and miraculously Achashverosh doesn't chop her head off, but instead welcomes her to an audience with him. And he says at the top of the page, we talked about this already last time, he says, anything you want, up to half the kingdom, right? Instead of the whole kingdom, or, the moon, I'll give you anything. So he offers her, encouragement and saying, I want to do whatever you want. If you're coming to see me, you have something on your mind, what can I do for you? I'm here for you. So now, here we go. It's so then the first full paragraph, the following verse
states.
Who wants to read for us today, please?
Well, I'm going to step up right at the
All
beginning.
Right, thank you.
Save all the anxiety on my part. The following verse states, Esther answered Ahasuerus, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet I have prepared for him. The rabbis taught in a Baraita, what was Esther's reason for inviting Haman to the banquet?
Okay, so the story in the Megillah is not, it's not short and to the point. That's one of the kind of approaches to humor that the Megillah takes. Instead of telling us a story in 3 lines, there was a bad guy, Haman, he wanted to destroy the Jews. Mordechai and Esther were outsmarted him and saved the Jews, and now we have a holiday. So instead, it goes through a whole rigmarole, right? And when Esther has this chance to, Achashverosh is saying, yes, I'm putty in your hands. Whatever you say, I'll do. So at that point, what she should say is, save the Jews, and let's not, be attacked by Haman's minions, right? So she doesn't say that. What does she say? She says, well, what I would really like is for you to come to dinner with me. Okay. So now the rabbis say, okay, so even if she's coming to dinner, what does she need a Haman there? Let him come to dinner, and then let her say to the king in this romantic dinner, if you really love me, you'll save the Jews. What's this extra stuff going on? Okay.
The Baraita records several reasons. Rabbi Eliezer says she set a trap for him. As it is said, may their table become a trap for them. Rabbi Yehoshua says she learned to do so from her father's house. If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat, etc. Rabbi Meir says she invited Haman so that he would not take counsel and rebel against the king. Rabbi Yehuda says she invited Haman so that they would not realize that she is a Jew. Rabbi Nehemiah says she invited Haman so that the Jews would not say, we have a sister in the royal palace who will entreat the king on our behalf, and neglect praying for divine mercy. Rabbi Yosef says she invited Haman so that he would be available to her the whole time, and perhaps the opportunity would arise for her to cause him to make some blunder in the king's presence. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says Esther reckoned perhaps the omnipresent will be aroused and will perform a miracle for us. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha says, I will smile at Haman, Esther planned, I will smile at Haman so that the king will suspect us of being intimately involved and have us both executed. That's counterintuitive. Rabbi Gamliel says, Esther knew that Ahasuerus was a fickle-minded king who might go back on his word. She therefore sought that Haman be present, so that if she is successful in convincing Ahasuerus to execute Haman, he would be able to do so right away before changing his mind again. Rabban Gamliel said, even after taking all these reasons into account, we still need the reason given by Rabbi Eliezer the Modian. for it was taught in a baraita. Rabbi Eliezer the Modean said, by inviting Haman, she made the king jealous of him, and she made the other nobles jealous of him.
All right, so look at that. Who could have thought that you would have so many different possibilities imagined for this particular thing? It's quite a nice little paragraph as far as I'm concerned. And each one of these suggestions is actually unpacking for us the situation and thinking about various different kinds of worries and concerns and calculations, sometimes in a proactive way and sometimes in a defensive kind of way. And it should, sort of a little bit open our eyes to the complexity of what was going on and the delicacy of what was going on. There's so many different moving parts here, and there's so many things and people that are involved that, things could go wrong or things could go in an unforeseen direction. How can I make my plan work out, despite the fact that there are so many other people who are trying to make their plans work out differently? So you have all of these different suggestions. So anybody want to comment on any of these particular ideas? Josie, you got to unmute.
There were so many of them, and I don't have the text because my printer's broken, that it's hard to remember them all. But one that sticks in my mind is she wants people to be jealous of Haman. She wants more people to hate him than be on his side. That
Right. So that's one of the later ones, and that's an interesting idea that she's trying to play. She's looking for allies, right? She's looking for ways to not just be the only person. Some of these other suggestions just focus on this triangle, right? Haman, Achashverosh, Esther, right? But some of the other ones look at it from a broader perspective, that there are other people involved and other considerations. And this one that you're mentioning is saying that, how am I going to bring this guy down all by myself? What if he has other people who are supporting him? How can I weaken his position in the court? How can I try to get other people to not like him, so that as I push, against him, it'll be easier. There'll be more support for it. So it's a kind of really, a shrewd kind of calculation of manipulating other people in their feelings and so on, and getting Haman to not be as powerful as he might be. Yeah. So there's I can't hear a word you're saying, Josie. You muted yourself again. But yeah, that would be one way of looking at it. So what are some of the other ways that we have here? We have suggestions, like I said, that focus more on the three of them. And then we have suggestions that open up the considerations to other ramifications or other factors that are involved. Okay, Jen.
My favorite is that she just thinks Achashverosh doesn't see things through. So let's get Haman right there in front of him, and he can execute him right away before he has a chance to be talked to by anyone else or etc.
Right.
So
Right. So
that's the most fun one.
So that's in some ways the exact opposite of the one that we just mentioned, right? The one that we just mentioned said this is going to be a whole long convoluted process, and the more people I get to be anti-Haman, the more successful I can hope to be, right? So I'm going to need other people in the court to be against Haman for this to work. This suggestion that Jen is highlighting is, just cut to the chase. Maybe I can do this as just a plain old melodramatic, personal vendetta, and get the king to be hot-headed and stab the guy to death right there, on the spot, and that'll take care of everything, right? So very much the opposite kind of perspective. So let's say we've got those as bookends. Then we've got a whole bunch of stuff in the middle, right? One of the interesting things that we have here, which is, I think, less accessible to us in our thinking, I think we could pretty much relate to either one of those two scenarios that we just talked about, is the one where it suggests that Esther is playing to the Jewish people's reaction, right? That she doesn't want, it's on the one hand, she needs help, she needs support, but it's not this realpolitik idea of, if I can get other people to be jealous and hate Haman, that's good for me, right? But rather she's saying, if it's gonna look too easy for the Jewish people, they're gonna all put their trust in me. They go, hey, we got an insider in the court. We don't have to worry about any of this stuff. We'll just let Esther perform her magic and we don't have to be involved at all. And therefore, she's mixing in more difficulty on purpose so that people will be more anxious in the Jewish community and will not give up their own prayers and fasting and appealing to God, which, instead of it being, I need people to continue to hate Haman, what she's saying, I need my people to not just trust in me as a supergirl, right? Superhero type person. I need them to keep on praying to God, so that who knows if I'm going to succeed or not. I need God's mercies aroused by the community. And so therefore, I need them to not take it for granted that I've got everything under control. It's an interesting kind of, again, in a hard way of saying all of this is there's a lot of manipulation going on here, right? So she's engineering a certain kind of set of reactions and so on. She's hoping to engineer. And one of them is, it's like, I'm going to try to trick the Jews into keeping on praying, right? Because otherwise, I know those Jews, they just will not show up for minyan,
Ouch.
Right. So I gotta make them feel a little less secure. If they're secure, if they're feeling secure, they're not going to do it, right? It's I got to make them in the trenches so that they then there's no atheists in the trenches. So I think that's a pretty fascinating idea. We have in our prayers, our daily prayers, we recite Psalms, this is mostly in Psuke de Zimra, where we have a whole string of Psalms that we recite to get ourselves into a prayerful state of mind and soul. And right after Ashrei, we have that Psalm 146. We do 145, 146, 147, 148, 149, 150, right? We do that whole string, and of course we do stuff before that. But 146, the Psalm right after Ashrei, it says, Al tivtechu benedivim, beven adam she'ein lo tshua. Do not put your trust in princes, in a human being, a mortal who cannot save, right? So there's a religious a religious call to us to not put all of our trust in the Führer, to use a terrible term, the leader, right? The hero, all of them are human. That's not who you put your trust in. And here, according to this suggestion, this was, who said this? Rabbi Nehemiah. Rabbi Nehemiah's suggestion, the last few lines at the bottom of the left-hand column and going on to the top, is he's saying that Esther is actually making sure that doesn't happen, right? She is, there's a temptation that we will put somebody on a pedestal, and even though she is rightfully a heroine and full of righteousness and courage, nevertheless, in the end, the real salvation, we can't lose sight of it. It has to come from God. So she herself is making that effort to deflect from her. Just to editorialize a little bit, we had a hot and heavy discussion with some people recently about Chabad, and one criticism, and many of you, may know, that there is a very strong element in Chabad that believes that the last Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was the seventh, that number is an important number in Jewish tradition, that he was the Messiah. And then they go into all kinds of extremes. Some, there's all, within the Messianic camp, is he dead, but he's coming back? He never died. He's the same kind of stuff that gets recapitulated, from Christian, traditions and thought about Jesus. So for many of them, and then there's a more moderate wing in Chabad, but they're all part of their circle and their community. And outsiders have pointed out that this was, to their mind, one of the failings of the Rebbe when he was alive, because he saw this happening. He saw people singing to him that he was the Mashiach, and he saw people, expressing all kind of adulation to him. And they said, why didn't he stop it? Why did he let it go? Why did he, at least passively let it go, if not encourage it? And there are videos of him like letting them, making the people sing stronger and louder and so on. What we have here with Esther is the opposite. You have a person who knows that she's in this very critical position, and according to Rabbi Nehemiah's simple kind of statement, what he's basically saying is she had a responsibility to put the perspective out there clearly and get the Jews to know that they have to appeal to God. Whether she's going to succeed or not is going to be not on her. It's going to be based on what God wants, and therefore everybody has to throw themselves down at God's mercy the way she is throwing herself down at the king's mercy. So that's, I think, a very interesting suggestion. We have, Josie.
The older I get, and I'm getting older, the less I like charisma. I think it's dangerous.
I think that you're very, very, what you're saying is very important. Charisma is so potentially poisonous, and the dangers of charisma are so, we've seen it again and again and again on so many levels within the Jewish community, and also, unfortunately, not just in this kind of like leading the public astray or something like that, but charisma also then allows people to commit crimes that then their supporters don't want to hear about. And it even brings people into the orbit of the person who's charismatic, and then that person abuses the acolyte, abuses the person who is in thrall to this amazingly strong personality that promises acceptance, or that promises salvation, or that promises, love, or all kinds of stuff. They represent this really supercharged source of goodness and power and so on. And then, unfortunately, individuals privately get hurt. And then sometimes groups just get led down the wrong way. If we were, and it can be super. Remember Jonesville? There was a charismatic person who led their entire group to death. So charisma is very, 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 very what can I say? Very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. It's hard. It's yeah. Yes. So and bringing up that note of caution is not appreciated a lot of times when you're in the context of the people who are adoring this person, and sometimes just calculating that it's good for us to have this charismatic person, because otherwise we're just not going to get market share. We're not going to get enough people to follow us. We're not going to get people to support what we want to do. So even though we find the person a little bit creepy or off-putting, but it's worth it because it advances the cause. What a sad calculation that, I think, invariably becomes. David, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm confused. Why are we talking about charisma? Josie, why? Where did this come from?
Came from Esther's concern that the Jewish people would put her on a pedestal. This is you came in a little late here. But this is the text here where the reason that Esther is making the process of defeating Haman a little more convoluted and a little more tense is to keep the Jews from just believing, okay, Esther's got it all. She's great. She can take care of it. Thank God we've got Esther. She's gonna save the Jewish people. So and then I started talking about other things. So that was the response that Josie brought up. All right. Somebody else wanted to say something? Jen, you wanted to say something else?
I agree with Josie, but yet, I don't think movements happen without some charisma. I even bet Moses, once he got over stammering, had some kind of charisma to, to guide a whole people. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we don't really know of any major scandals or abuses that he's gone through. He's pretty charismatic, and he would need to be to keep his community together in exile. So I mean, I get it, it's a double-edged sword, but it's hard to imagine a lot of stuff happening without people who have some kind of charisma going on.
Right. No, I think, look, charisma is just a God-given gift, right? You can't learn charisma. You can't buy charisma. Either you got it or you don't. So it's a gift. The question is how it's used and how it's channeled. And the Dalai Lama, I think, is a beautiful example of a person who first of all, he laughs at himself a lot. He's got this humble quality to him. Like you say, as far as we know, thankfully, there are no really terrible things that he personally is guilty of, or his close circles. He doesn't seem to be manipulating and abusing his power. And that's a choice. That's a glorious, wonderful choice that he has made to be that kind of human being and that kind of leader, and to take the gift that he has and use it right, and use it the right way. And unfortunately, he's an exception. Unfortunately, one of the special things about him, that he stands out, head and shoulders over so many other people, is because he's not misusing his gift, and he's he's an exemplar of taking that charisma and using it gently. There's a gentleness about his leadership, right? He's not leading some crusade. He's not like all of a sudden, getting all of his masses of people, millions and millions of people, to march on the Chinese capital, or he hasn't lost his sense of reality, and and reality, of course, his teaching, let's really know what reality is. So yeah, he's one of the good ones, but he's one of the rare ones. And that's the sad part. Yeah. All right. Any of the other examples that we have here that anybody wants to comment on? Let's look for a second. It's a little I think, a little shocking. on the right-hand side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines from the top. The very last letter on that line is R. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha says. You see that?
Yep.
Okay. Can you read that one more time? His suggestion.
Sure. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha says, Esther planned, I will smile at Haman so that the king will suspect us of being intimately involved and have us both executed.
So what do you think of that?
I thought that was counterintuitive, but I read the note, and
Right, so read the note. If the note makes you feel good, then why not share it with everyone?
Note 42, literally, so that he will be killed, he and her. The Gemara in Tanit teaches that even after a decree is promulgated, if one of its protagonists die, the decree dies with him. An alternative text is in Rashi. Thus, Haman's death would bring about the nullification of the decree, calling for the annihilation of the Jews.
Okay, but that doesn't answer
Why Esther?
Right.
Yeah.
This note is completely unhelpful with
Yeah.
regard to what the text says, that she says, well, I'll engineer it so that both of us can get killed. But if you think about it, there's also, I think, a very deep appreciation of what's going on here. Josie, you said you wanted to say something? Yeah.
Well, I think she's putting herself at risk in order to achieve this end, which she sees is worth it, which is pretty brave.
She's willing to sacrifice herself what it's going to take, because again, we had the businessman. Well, he'll get jealous and he'll get so angry he'll kill Haman right at the spot, right? But who says he's not going to kill her, right? So that's what he recognizes. What Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha recognizes is she's playing a very dangerous game. In order to get the king to get angry at Haman, what's she going to do? She's going to talk to the king about human rights values. She's going to read to him the Declaration, of human rights. That's what's going to create, his impassioned anger against Haman. No, she's going to have to play this wily game. And once you start playing that wily game, you lose control. You don't know what's going to happen. And what Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha is putting out is she understands that in order to get that end result of Haman getting killed, she may lose her life. She may have to put her own life, into the sights of Achashverosh's rage, because that's the only way he's going to then believe that Haman is no good, right? She's going to have to use his jealousy.
But her goal is beyond getting Haman killed. That will make the decree.
Once Haman is killed, then the Jews are safe, right?
So
then the decree no longer has a sponsor, so to speak. Yeah, Sylvia.
Well, there's another interesting aspect to it, because if the decree works or not, should the decree annulment not work, she becomes a martyr.
Well,
and then the discussion of her not wanting to become a charismatic leader is kind of nullified.
So this is the fact that she will be a martyr. First of all, it's not irrelevant whether the decree is nullified or not. If the decree is not nullified, then guess what? The Jews get wiped out, and she's a martyr to
Nobody.
Nobody, exactly. So she has to get the decree nullified. That's the assumption, and she's willing to die for that. But the fact that she's going to be dying under suspect circumstances, she's going to the newspapers will be queen caught in affair with courtier and executed, for betraying the king. So, how many people? She's playing a very dirty game, and whether that's going to reflect well on her or not, let's think of Vashti. Remember good old Vashti, the first queen, the one that Esther replaced. There was somebody who, depending on how you read it, but she could have been seen as a martyr. She could have been seen as somebody who stood up for her principles. And look at what happened with her. She just basically gets, thrown away and forgotten about. So, using, gambling on martyrdom is not a good gamble. I would not, counsel anybody, oh yeah, great. That'll be the way that we'll get the cause, done. I mean, it's tragic. Look at how many people we've had it throughout history. People have put themselves, into a martyred position. Remember back in the old days with Vietnam. Look at all those Buddhist monks that immolated themselves and tried to stir the conscience of the world. Can anybody name any of them?
Not one.
Right? I mean, did they make some kind of difference? Well, they horrified certain people, but it took ages and ages and thousands and tens of thousands of other deaths and other considerations, to bring that whole thing, to wind down and so on. Martyrdom is not an effective tool for accomplishing anything. Martyrdom in its essence is saying, I give up, but I will not give up my principles. I will die rather than go along with what the world is doing. And it's only much later that martyrs here and there, here and there, again, most martyrs are never remembered. Here and there, a martyrdom story gets cherished as a lesson for the future. We have the Martyrology on Yom Kippur, where we talk about the 10 rabbis that would rather die than give up, teaching Torah and living by the Torah. So we have, brought that up. In Martyrology actually starts with the Hanukkah story, with Jews who decided that they would rather die than follow the Greek rules. Obviously, Christianity took martyrology to an extreme, level. God becomes the martyr, but in general, there are the ratio of martyrs who have been remembered, and is 100 million to 1 or something like that. And then even being remembered, it's for later. It's almost never. It almost never. I can't think of an example of somebody being a martyr that actually accomplished something at the moment. So, Geraldine, you wanted to say something? No.
When you mentioned Vashti, my thinking is, since it was, with due respect to the women's movement, she was only being a martyr for women, whereas some of the others you mentioned involved men or men and women. So that's another reason why she was not considered that way, I think, at that period of time. Now maybe she would have been.
Well, now she definitely has been reclaimed as a heroine. We already saw that in the Gemara. She's one of the bad guys. How could she possibly be considered a heroine? She's this non-Jewish queen, and so on. So she gets a very bad rap within the Talmud that we've already studied. And yes, so it took over 2,000 years for Vashti to all of a sudden be seen in a positive light. And part of that, what you're saying about who is she dying for? It took a long time for us to finally recognize that dying for women is dying for all humanity. That there is no difference. If you're standing up for women, you're standing up for everybody. If you're not going to stand up for women, you're standing against everybody.
Right.
So, but it took us ages. To get there. So you're right. In the old days, she was just considered a stubborn lady that didn't know her place. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Anybody else want to add any other words to these things? Yeah, Stuart.
Well, I mean, just to take a step back from the particulars of all these different scenarios, it's kind of it's almost like a reductio of Talmudic commentary here. We have such a thin premise to begin with. All we know is that Esther invited Haman to the feast, and then the rabbis just take it from there, and they just speculate and they speculate and they speculate, and it's kind of fun. And I guess we learn something from the various ways they spin out this scenario, but there's even less than usual. There's no textual basis, or the proof text that they use are even more remote from the actual story. I don't know, it's just a really striking, I can't remember this many alternative speculations on top of alternative speculations just piled up. It's like you read an academic paper sometimes and here are 12 different theories of this that someone has put forward, and all of them are wrong, and I'm going to tell you what the right one is. It's just, it's kind of fun, but it's also kind of, at some level, there's something about it that's overly, I don't know, I'm not entirely taking them seriously. I wonder how much they're kind of playing with this and having fun with this, as opposed to seriously offering serious interpretation of such a thing.
So that, first of all, 12 things and they're all wrong. Here we have 12 things and they're all right. I think that, the question of seriousness versus having fun is actually of the essence of Purim. I think that that's very, very much part of the whole, enterprise of dealing with this story, and first of all, making it into a sacred story, and then unpacking it. This little paragraph doesn't exist in a vacuum. We've been having the rabbis speculating and expanding and discussing different aspects of the Purim story for pages now. So this is all part of a piece. It's about the fact that, I see it as the opposite. I see it as, if you just, first of all, it's very rooted in the story, because they're actually saying, here's a turn in the story. Let's understand why this choice was made by Esther of doing it this way, when it could have been so much simpler, or we could have just cut to the chase. And, anything you want, Esther, I'll do. Okay, I ask that you please chop off Haman's head. Let's what's this whole business about with, and then she's going to have a second, they're really reading the story very much for what the story is. That's what I was saying at the very beginning when I introduced this. The story is very tongue-in-cheek in its presentation of court intrigues and of these protagonists, and of also the way it tells it. I'm gonna be telling this in a very leisurely way. Don't rush me. I'll get to the point eventually. If you read the just the literary style of the Megillah, it's very self-indulgent, and it can be because we won. And what I think, and I've been trying to do it, so maybe I didn't succeed so well, is I'm trying to show that underneath all of the lightheartedness and all underneath the party atmosphere that Purim always is suffused with, is the rabbis are constantly highlighting and hyper highlighting the precariousness of Jewish existence and the complexity of how to deal with that. And here it, like, you're right. I don't think we've come across any paragraph quite like this one. That it just piles on one more and then another one and then another one and then another one. But that's exactly, I think that's the ultimate point, is that we, this is so precarious and so complicated. And this is not the Purim story. This is the Jewish story.
Right. I was just
And
going to say that this is the history of the Jews. How do the Jews survive in hostile,
Right.
Cultures?
Right.
And either they collaborate to some extent, or
Yeah.
they're subversive, or they just have to learn how to survive because the world is always against them. Yeah.
Right. So
And
that's why I feel that this is effective. But that's everybody.
No. I think it's effective as no. I mean, I'm not being critical of it. I think they're doing something important, but this is sort of it's a tour de force of Talmudic commentary.
Absolutely.
Right? They're pushing it to the limits here, and they're revealing all this imaginative creativity to show here are all these different ways we can think about it, and each one, they're not frivolous, they're all interesting, but there's the textual basis seems they're not worrying about that really, or
right. That's not the issue right now. They're
Right.
not reading an extra word. What does that extra word come to teach?
Right.
them? Why is it written, spelled a certain way? No, what they're doing is they're diving deep into what is happening behind the scenes,
Yeah.
what's happening in each person's in this particular case. And this is also part of the flow that we've had. What's happening in Esther's mind? What kind of calculations does she have to take seriously in order to accomplish her mission? Yeah, Sylvia.
Yeah, I've been thinking all along that this is a very, this is put into the Tanakh. It's there in our Bible. It's there. It's recognized when they compiled the Bible. They recognized that, yeah, we've been fighting to have it, to establish Judaism all these years, and went through all kinds of things. And then we suddenly have a community somewhere, and we have to know how to preserve it.
Yeah.
And it's because it's such a bizarre story, it had a reason for being put in there.
Right. In many ways, it's just a fairy tale. And yet the choice to put it into the Holy Scripture was made. And it's a very bold choice, right? And that's part of why we're looking at this again and again and again.
And following through, it does say, it says, this is going to come up again and again and again.
Mm.
And how to, be prepared. Think about ways to deal with this. You're not the majority. There's a big world out there. How are you going to stay loyal to who you think you are?
Good. All right. So now we'll continue. The Gemara records two more.
The Gemara records two more reasons why Esther invited Haman to her banquet.
Just when we thought we had more reasons than we could shake a stick at, here's two more.
At least two more. Rabbi said her reasoning, was based on the following verse. Pride comes before destruction. Abaya and Rava both say her reasoning was based on this verse. When they are hot, I will prepare their feasts, etc.
Okay, let's look at verse at note 46. 46, yeah.
46, it's fairly long. The entire verse reads from Jeremiah 51:39. When they are hot, I will prepare their feasts, and I will make them drunk, so that they will be merry and sleep a perpetual sleep and not awake, says Hashem. This verse refers to Belshazzar and his cohort as they returned victorious from the battlefield. Feeling hot and tired, they drank wine to the point of intoxication. Belshazzar was slain that very night. It's in Daniel. Esther saw that the feasts of the wicked lead to their retribution. She therefore invited Haman to her banquet in the hope that his destruction would follow. Maharsha explains the difference between this reason and a similar reason given by Rabbi Eliezer above. May their table become a trap for them.
That was the first part of the paragraph, that long paragraph.
Right. Rabbi Eliezer's reason applies to Haman alone. Esther saw how in the past Ahasuerus's feast had been a trap for Vashti, and she hoped that another one of his feasts would entrap Haman. The reason given here applies also to Ahasuerus himself. Esther hoped that as a result of this banquet, divine retribution would befall the king and Haman, similar to the punishment that befell King Belshazzar upon his feast.
All right, so take that for what you want. But the point that I would emphasize here is that there is a difference between many of the explanations we had before, which, to Stuart's point, are not scripturally based. They're a reading of the situation in all of its, complexities of court intrigues and so on and so forth. These two reasons are much more of a homiletic, midrashic kind of thing that we have become used to, where, oh, it's the fulfillment. She's following the fulfillment of a verse. She knows this verse from the Bible, and she's simply following the way that this should be fulfilled, right? So I can't just ask for Haman's head to be chopped off, because I have to fulfill, the prophet Jeremiah's verse that the wicked should be, punished through taking advantage of their, their hot-headedness and their sense of joy in accomplishing what they think they're going to accomplish. And of course, the first verse is about pride. I'll get Haman to feel even more pride, which of course is what happens, right? Haman comes home from the banquet and goes, look, I was the only one, invited. I must be some hot stuff. So, there's this kind of moralistic idea that, pride comes before the fall. So I will enhance Haman's pride in order for this to happen. So this is, a more general up there kind of moralistic and homiletic thinking, as opposed to the other stuff, which I thought were striking actually for their insight into the complexity of the situation. Anybody else have anything else to add to this?
I just had a technical question, and we always notice pride comes before the fall, which is sort of self-imposed, and destruction is from the outside in. And I didn't know what the Hebrew was, which they quote there.
So the Hebrew is before destruction is pride.
So it is destruction. It's not it's
right. Chevrah, breaking.
Okay.
Collapse, tragedy. Right. In conclusion, we're at the top now of 15b4. No,
In conclusion,
no, we didn't get there yet. That was the.
In conclusion, the Gemara relates, Rabbi bar Avuha met the prophet Elijah and asked him, of all the reasons given, which was the one that actually prompted Esther to do this, that is, to invite Haman? Elijah answered him, Esther was influenced by all the reasons given by all the Tanaim and all the Amoraim mentioned above.
Right. So what I was saying before, not all these 12 reasons are all wrong. Let me give you the right reason. But all of these are swimming around in her, desperate calculations to try to save the day. Right. And this is told to us by Elijah. Right. We've had this before also. Elijah is our bridge figure. Right. He's the human being who ascends to heaven and then is charged with coming down to heaven, from heaven down to earth, and every once in a while communicating, saving, this poor person or that poor person, entering our Seder tables, our Seder homes at the Seder table. He's the messenger from above who knows what it means to be human and also knows what's going on, in God's place.
Where does he first appear?
What?
Where does he first appear?
He's a historical figure. He's one of the early prophets. You can, read his story in the Book of Kings. And then he, in fact, this coming Shabbat, come to Shul this Shabbat. This coming Shabbat, we're going to read a Haftorah that tells about his famous contest with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. So that's the Haftorah, that's the prophetic reading for this Shabbat. So he was a historical figure, and then he is recorded as ascending to heaven in a fiery chariot. That's the end of his life. And the tradition understood that to mean that he didn't really die. So that hundreds of years later, the prophet says, well, in the end of time, right? So that's the prophetic vision of the end of days. Elijah will announce the end of days. So he became a mythic figure over 2,500 years ago. So, okay. Now, hold on a second. Oh, you have that, yes, Belshazzar's feast. It's a great painting. So you've got in the chat, Stuart put in a link. Is that what you did? Yes, a link to Rembrandt's painting. Right.
Oh yeah.
It's also I think like an oratorio or something of I think Handel maybe or something like that. There's a whole musical thing about it. But that painting is a knockout. Okay, here we go.
In conclusion, the Gemara relates.
No, we read that.
I reread that. Sorry. The Megillah states further, and Haman recounted to them the glory of his wealth and the large number of his sons.
So this is Haman boasting after he gets this invitation. Look at that. It was such a limited, invitation list. The guest list is just me, Esther, and Achashverosh. Me, the queen, and the king. So who am I? Wow, I must be so important, right? So this is where it goes to his head, and he's, just, bragging all over the place about how great he is. Okay, the Gemara asks.
The Gemara asks, how many are indicated by the large number of his sons? Rav said he had 30 sons altogether. 10 died, 10 were hanged, and 10 were so poor they had to go around knocking on doors to beg for food. And the rabbi said those who had to go around knocking on doors for food were actually 70 in number, as it is written, that is, the sons of Haman, who were full, have now hired themselves out for bread. Do not read this as written full, rather read it as if it were written 70.
Right, in Hebrew, Sveim is full, Shivim it's the same letters, and it's pronounced differently, and Shivim is 70, Sveim is full, satiated.
Okay.
Let's go a little further.
And Rami Bar Abba says, all of Haman's sons together numbered 208, as it is said, and the large number of his sons. The numerical value of the Hebrew word verov, the large number, is 208, QED.
The Gemara asks.
But the numerical value of verov, the large number, is 214. Aha. The plot thickens. The Gemara answers. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzhak said, in the verse it is written verov, the large number, without an extra vav, and thus the numerical value of the word as recorded in scripture is 208.
And now you can say,
aha,
QED. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry.
So right. So this section, I would take the recording that we have, and I would cut out Stuart's comments from before, and I would, very happily put them right over here. This is a fun little, intermezzo that the rabbis engage in, where they just play around. Okay, he says he has a lot of children. What do you think a lot of children is? Right? I think 206. You know, if you're on a date with somebody and you're thinking about whether this person is somebody that you want to, make a family with, and you say, you know what, do you want children? Yes, I want children. I want a lot of children. So then you just simply say so you really want 206 children? Is that what so that's the idea. And we've had this before. And like I said, I think some other time, this is a game that the rabbis like to play. This is one of these little, Sunday morning, the New York Times comes in and there's this like numbers game of how many different, how many numbers can you make up for this particular verse referring to something. In our traditional Haggadah, this becomes like a big game for how many plagues were the Egyptians smitten with at the Red Sea. Because at the Red Sea, it was even more than in Egypt. In Egypt, we can't get away from it, it's 10. But in the Red Sea, this one says it was 50, this one says no, it was 200, no, it was 250. So they have a good time doing that kind of stuff. It lets off a little steam, and that way the rabbis don't get in trouble, when they go out into the street. So this is the kind of stuff that I don't have any apologia for it, to say, no, this is very deep. This is very, very symbolically, esoterically significant. So no, I think that they had a good time. We have in our Megillah, in the Megillah itself, there's this fun time, this fun moment when the Megillah reader traditionally reads the names of the 10 sons of Haman who were hung. And it's written specially in the Megillah. It's written, and what it is the name and then ve'et, the name and ve'et, and it's in 2 columns with a lot of blank space, almost like it's the song at the Red Sea or Moses' last song, but it's really just about the hanging of these 10 sons. And the Megillah reader traditionally tries to read it all in one breath, and it's a lot of hard to pronounce names, but you do it. So we make fun from it, and it's it's always good to see the bad guys get their comeuppance, and here they're saying there were 10 people who are called the 10 sons of Haman who were hung. But no, let's multiply even more. There were more and more and more sons. So in the traditional Hanukkah song, Ma'os Sur, there's a little bit of an indication that those are not the only sons of Haman. In the Megillah, you would think those are his 10 sons. But in the Ma'os Sur, the Ma'os Sur gives stanza by stanza. It goes through the history of the Jewish people until Hanukkah, and the Purim one says, Rov banav v'kinyanav al ha'etz talita, that most of his sons were hung on a tree. So according to that version, he didn't have 30, because 10 is not most of 30, but he had, more than 10 sons. Okay, so this is, again, part of the way that we can embellish and have a good time.
Rabbi,
Yes.
so is that saying that these 10 sons were with Haman against us, but there were sons who had nothing to do with any of this? Like, what's the?
Well, so in the
reason
song, it doesn't really say one way or another. In this text, they all get punished, right? Some of them die in battle. Some of them die by being captured and hung. Some of them are just reduced to penury, as they say. In this text, none of them are good guys, right? The other song really doesn't deal with the question, right? Your question, harkens back to what we've talked about a number of other times, that the sons of Korach don't follow their father. The sons of Korach are righteous and end up contributing psalms to the book of Psalms. But, so Korach was a bad guy, but his children didn't follow in his footsteps. But for Haman, we don't know. All right. Okay, we got another couple of minutes. Let's keep going. Now, let's see.
Megillah's-
Maybe we'll finish the tractate today.
Excuse me. The Megillah states further, that night the sleep of the king was disturbed.
Okay, so I mentioned this a few times, that there's a tradition to read that phrase. The Hebrew is Balayla Hahu Nadada Shnat HaMelech. And the word HaMelech is the king. That's the same word that we have to start off the morning prayers on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That God is the king who sits on a throne of judgment. That's high and supernal in heaven. And so there we go. HaMelech Yoshev Al Kisei Rambani. So that's the way we start Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur davening in the morning. So there's a tradition to use that melody for this verse. So Balayla Unadada Ashnat HaMelech, because the king is not Achashverosh. The king is God. So this is, even though God's name is not mentioned in the Megillah, but God's guiding providence is how everything turns out. He's hidden behind the human machinations that are at play. So this is read as, at that night, so to speak, God's slumber, God's sleeping and letting us get into trouble and all of the other darkness that we're experiencing. Now it's beginning to break, right? So that's the way we read it according to the tradition, the custom when we read the Megillah on Purim. Okay, so that's the verse. Let's see what happens. And that's now based on what we were about to read.
Rabbi Tanchum said, this means that the sleep of the king of the universe was disturbed. And the rabbis said, it means, excuse me, that the celestial creatures, that is the angels, were stirred, and the earthly creatures, that is Ahasuerus, were stirred. Rava said the verse refers to the actual sleep of King Ahasuerus. A thought occurred to Ahasuerus. He thought, what is the meaning of this strange thing that took place before me today, that Esther invited Haman to the banquet? Perhaps they're conspiring against that man, euphemism for himself, to kill him. He thought again, if so, is there no one who loves me, who would have informed me of their plot? He thought again, perhaps there was some person who did me a favor, and I never rewarded him, and therefore people desist and do not inform me of such matters. Straight away, he ordered that the record book, the annals, be brought to see if indeed someone had done him a favor and had not been rewarded.
Okay, so Stuart, what do you think? Is this should we take this text seriously, or should we just sort of like that's a rhetorical question. But my argument would be this is a little bit of the other side of the story, right? Now the rabbis are going into the psychology of Achashverosh. We had this whole manipulation on the part of Esther, and she has now engineered that there will be this banquet of just the three of them, the queen, the king, and Haman. She's doing it for all of the reasons that we had before. She thinks that this is going to end up solving, her problem and the problem of the Jewish people. But Achashverosh obviously doesn't know all of what she's thinking. And now, according to this, way of thinking about it, Achashverosh starts having second thoughts. He's enamored with seeing the queen. He hasn't seen her in a while. He's besotted with his love and desire for her. Oh yes, anything you want. Oh, I want to make a banquet. Okay, great. And then that night he starts going, wait a second, what did I just get myself into? Why is this happening? I think it's very human. I think it's very, very accurate about the way we get ourselves into all kinds of situations. And then only afterwards, we start thinking about, wait a second, what exactly was I thinking? What were they thinking? Why is this situation playing out the way it's playing out? And here we have, of course, him starting to get paranoid about, hey, maybe Esther and Haman actually have something going, behind my back. Now, of course, every king, certainly back in those days, had their food taster and had their spies and so on. Every king knew that they were basically a sitting duck to be murdered, deposed, and so on. So this is a little bit of a kind of an imagining of Achashverosh at this point going, I'm not totally in control here, am I? These other people are there. And then he says to himself, who loves me? So there's a certain kind of childishness to this, but I think it's also actually pretty deep. We had an American leader who was obsessed with this all the time, very recently. And to a certain extent, it comes with the territory. What are my polls this morning? What's my standing here? So he's starting to thrash around going, wait a second, who are my real supporters? Who can I really trust? How come I'm beginning to start getting suspicious? Why hasn't anybody warned me about this? If Haman and Esther have a thing going on, how come this is the first I'm beginning to start sensing it? Where's my gazpacho agents to tell me what's going on? And so he's beginning to wonder about that. Okay, we're going to finish with this right now, a cliffhanger. And I hope we'll be able to continue next time. Okay, Yesher Koach, everybody.
Are you sending out the next set of pages or have you already?
I did. Send me a note and I'll send it to you. So otherwise, people asked me already. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.